We are on page 61, and we're going to be ordering rational numbers. The directions read, you can use the number line to order positive and negative rational numbers. So we're on example 2. And before we were ordering fractions and decimals, and we're still going to do that, and some mixed numbers and stuff like that, but now we're also going to make them positive and negative, which actually doesn't really make it harder, and in a sense it actually makes it easier. Example 2. I think we can see everything now. There's no question here, we're just going to go through our thoughts. 5 friends completed a triathlon that included a 3-mile run, a 12-mile bike ride, and a half-mile swim. To compare their running times, they created a table that shows the difference between each person's time and the average time, with negative numbers representing times less than the average. So that's actually a good thing. If you're in a run, you want to be faster than the average. So having a less time is a good thing. It says order the numbers from greatest to least. So right off the bat, I think it's always a good idea to either underline or highlight the directions that tell us what we're trying to do. We're going to order these numbers greatest to least. Step 1 says write the fractions as equivalent decimals. So if I went up to my 2 fractions here, that's a simple one. John, 1/2 is equal to 0.5. That's an easy one. I hope you have that one memorized by now. And then Sue's already in a decimal. That's 1.4. Anna is -1 and 1/4. I'm going to change that to -1 and I just need to remember what a fourth is equal to. A fourth of $1 is 25 cents. So it's going to be -1.25. And then I've got -2.0 and positive 1.95. Now I have all decimals. I'm going to kind of smudge these out. I have all decimals. And this wasn't the way you have to do it, but this is a good way to do it. Step 2 says use a number line to write the decimals in order. So I want you to notice that we're going to have 2 negatives here, and those are going to be on the left side of the number line. I can go all the way out to -2.0. That's right here, -2.0. And then we've got -1.25. That's going to be in between -1 and 1.50. If you think about money, this is $1 and that's $1.50. 1.25 would be right in the middle of that. So we've got -2.0 and -1.25. I'm going to just rewrite it right here. We've got -2. We've got -1.25. I've got 0 right in the middle. Now I have my positive numbers. Now earlier when I said that when you include negatives it almost makes it easier, what I did was I just focused on my 2 negatives and now I'm done with those. And now I have 3 positives. I've got 0.5, I've got 1.4, and I've got 1.95. 0.5 is just right here on the number line. And then we've got 1.4, that's going to be 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, so that goes right there. This is 0.5, this is 1.4. And 1.95 is it's 5 little hundredths away from 2 whole, so it's practically almost to 2.0. It's 1.95. Now last but not least, we have to put these numbers in order from greatest to least. A lot of kids, because it's left to right, would want to do least to greatest, but the directions said greatest to least. So my greatest number is 1 and 95 hundredths, then 1 and 4 tenths, then 0.5, then -1 and 25 hundredths, then -2. And notice what they do is that they rewrite them in the numbers that were originally given to us from the table. So if we converted it, then we have to convert it back. So that's the example. Now let's go ahead and try the problem at the bottom of the page. Well, there's 2. There's a reflect, which is really kind of simple. Let's read the reflect, and then I want to look back at the problem, and I'll help you write it. Reflect number 4 reads, communicate mathematical ideas. Describe a different way to order the numbers. Well, we got the right answer, but what was a different way we could have done it? If we really wanted to, we could have, instead of converting 1/2 and 1 1/4 to decimals, we could have converted the other ones to fractions. This one could be, and this is probably not the better way, but you could have made this one 1 and 4 tenths. And you could have made this one -2 wholes. And you could have made this one 1 and 95 100ths. You could have done that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use that as my answer for describe a different way to order the numbers. If you wanted to, you could have converted the decimals to fractions with common denominators instead of converting the fractions to decimals. I'm going to read that again. If you wanted to, you could have converted the decimals to fractions with common denominators instead of converting the fractions to decimals. I think the first way we did it was probably better, but that way would have worked as well. All right, so let's check out the question at the bottom of the page. And I think what I need to do here, I think I'm going to need a little bit of space for this one. So I'm going to go ahead and make a whiteboard. I think I'm going to, you've seen that answer long enough. If not, you can always hit pause, review. I'm going to move this page up a little bit. I'm going to make a little whiteboard because I think I'm going to need it. We'll see. All right, so your turn at the bottom of the page. Try this problem and then check your answer using this video, or fix your answer using this video. Number 5 reads, to compare their bike times, the friends create a table that shows the difference between each person's time and the average bike time, or the bike times from least to greatest. So first of all, we're going to do least to greatest. Second of all, let's use some common sense here. Which ones are going to be the least ones? Are they going to be the positives or the negatives? And I hope you realize that the least, when we're talking about a number line here, the least is always going to be on the left, and the greatest is always going to be on the right. And in addition to that, when we're dealing with positives and negatives, 0 would be in the middle, and the negatives will be on the left, and the positives will be on the right. So when it says least to greatest, go find your negatives and get those out of the way. Right now, we can only worry about negative 1.8 and negative 1.25. So here's kind of the deal, though. Kids really get this one wrong all the time. They look at this and they call this 25, and they look at this and they call this 8. And they think, well, 25 is bigger than 8, which it is. But the problem is they shouldn't do that, because it's not fair to compare something in the hundreds to something in the thousands. So instead of comparing 25 to 8, you should compare 25 to 80. And if you think about it, 1 and 80 is going to be farther to the left. On negative 1 and 80 hundredths would be farther to the left than negative 1 and 25 hundredths. So think about the number line. Let's see if I can draw that for you. I could probably try. I think I can. Let's check this out. So if I have this point be 0, I'm going to have this point be negative 1. I'm going to have this point be negative 2. Negative 1 and 80 would be, so let's do it this way. We've got negative 1. This will be negative 1.5. And so it would be negative 1, negative 1.1, negative 1.2, negative 1.3, negative 1.4, negative 1.5, negative 1.6, negative 1.7, negative 1.8. That's this point right here. Negative 1.8 is going to be right there. And then go back to do this one right here. I'm going to label that negative 1.80. You can call it 1.80 or you can call it 1.8. It's the same thing. You can annex the 0, or you can actually just take the 0 off. So that's going to be right here. Now where's this one going to be? Negative 1.25. Well, think about money. If this one's negative 150, well, 25 is half of that. It's going to be right smack dab in the middle. That's going to be negative 1 and 25 hundredths. So that's kind of a long explanation for a fairly simple idea, which is this. Negative 1.8 is the smallest value. It's the farthest to the left. Then we've got negative 1.25. If you got those wrong, please fix them. Now we've got our 3 positives to deal with. So now I can cross off my negatives because I'm working back towards the positive numbers. Remember, we're doing least to greatest. So now I've got 1, 1 and 2/5, 1 and 1/9. I sure hope you know that 1 would be the smallest of those values. So now I just have to compare these two. And those are going to be a little bit tricky to compare. Except if you make a common denominator, watch how easy this is. I'm going to do 1 and 2/5 down here. And the reason why that's tricky is it's hard to compare fifths to tenths. But watch how easy I can make this become tenths. If I simply multiply each of those numbers by 2, what would I get? Well, I don't multiply the whole number, but I do 2 times 2 and I get 4. And I do 5 times 2 and I get 10. So now I've got 1 and 4/10. That's this number. And then I've got 1 and 9/10. Clearly 1 and 9/10 is the biggest. So my next answer would be 1 and 4/10, which I'm going to record as 1 and 2/5. And then my last number is going to be 1 and 9/10. I know that's a little messy. I've tried to explain to you in the past that writing with a stylus on a computer screen is kind of hard. But I hope the explanation there made sense. So that would be our correct answer. All right, good job. You are done with page 61.